This is there a plausible realist theory of fictional characters by Andrew Wynne Owen, and this is in Contributions of the Austrian Ludwig Wittgenstein Society, which I think is a book. Oh no, it's a journal. Okay, but yeah. Reading Rep says that's the gray area you're referring to. Some schools have a no AI policy, like our local undergrad. Even if you use it to inspire your argument, you get an F on the material. Some of the guidelines lack a lot of nuance. Yeah, so it's a new stuff, and people are really trying to work it out, what to do about it. It's like calculators. First there were no calculators, then calculators became required at a certain point so that you could use the graphing functions because people want you to be able to see the graphing. No one wants to have to graph something by hand. It's a pain in the butt, like putting all the dots down, writing lines, but you have to know how to do that. Then the calculators get used by hand, and soon enough, the AI will be included in certain ways. You'll be allowed it in certain respects, but you're still going to have to know stuff. We need to do the value of malevolent creativity on Sunday. Okay. Remind me, Vipers. Hit me up on Discord, but we can do that. Laughing says, what's the fictional character realism even? We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it, or we're going to find out what this person says. I know a little bit about this topic. Sinister Mike says, fuck that. What someone creates is, for you, and they happen to use AI. You read it, and then you're inspired by it. Unwittingly, this is bullshit. Someone's if they're threatened by the fact we have access to knowledge. Yeah. What's the TLDR on realism? Okay, that's a fair question. We can start off with that. So, Sherlock Holmes exists in our world as a fictional character. Sherlock Holmes is real in our world as a fictional character. In the world of Arthur Conan Doyle that he set up for Sherlock Holmes is real in that world. In that fictional world, Sherlock Holmes is real. So Sherlock Holmes exists in our world as a fictional character. That is an object in our world. You can go find instances, or Santa Claus doesn't exist in our world, but you can find representations of Santa Claus just as you can find representations of Sherlock Holmes. But Sherlock Holmes is not a myth. It's an explicitly fictional character. So what is a denizen of our actual reality? Sherlock Holmes is a denizen of our actual reality in the sense that he is a character created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. In the world of Sherlock Holmes lives at 221B Baker Street. That is a real location in London in that book. That location does not exist, or did not exist, in London in the real world. So now we've got two different Londons. One's real and one's in the fake world, but they both have real locations in them. So you have to think, what exists in our world and how does it exist? This is what we're doing. Okay. So here we go. So now we're talking back and forth. There's a Sherlock Holmes museum at Baker Street, London. Yeah, exactly. So the real world has now taken on characteristics of the fake world, or the fictional world. Kip Arzer says there exists a possible world such that there is a person P in the set of people P who has the property P1 through Pn, such that they are identical to Sherlock Holmes. Yes, that is terrible analytic philosophy, and I know lots about that. Well, not as much as I should, but yeah. Yes. Corwin says, I think Abraham Lincoln is a good example. He was a real person, but our concept of home, honest Dave, is probably more modern fiction than how he actually talked or behaved. Yeah, and that's all history is kind of like that. Anything in history, anything really, is our projections of it, our understandings, our limited understandings of it. So this is actually a very important question. How do we talk about historical figures? How do we talk about fictional things like Sherlock Holmes as opposed to Abraham Lincoln? This is why it's a philosophical topic, because getting clear on what we mean by these sort of historical things, fictional things, helps us get clear on what is real in our actual world. I'm real, you're real, AI is real, but how does it exist? So yeah. But here we go. We're going to read this. And as always, let me know. It's my first time reading it too. I don't endorse it. We're just evaluating it. The debate between realists and anti-realists about fictional characters is important partly because it connects with debates about the nature of reference. Yeah, so how do you talk about stuff in a fictional world like 221B Baker Street? Because that doesn't exist in London. It only exists in the London in the book. According to the descriptivist model of reference held by Frege and Russell, a name has a reference to an object due to the connection of that name with a description, which is meant by the relevant object. Yeah, according to the causal communicative model held by Millians, A name refers in virtue of a chain of reference linking that name to a referent. Kripke's work influentially revived Million View, the Million View, and challenged the Phrygian view. Yeah, so there's a causal structure. So like if I name a location, that means like I dubbed it something like 221B Baker Street, and how that causal link comes back, like people understand it. That's how we understand it. A lot of people are in this sort of view of, well, how did it get named and how do we understand it? I am slightly farther away from that. I'm more, I guess, I'm an identificationist. I talk about how we identify things. I'm not talking about how we describe it. It's like the methods we use to identify stuff. It could be the historical causal model, but I'm more identificationist than either. Like I don't hold either of these theories. I'm somewhere in between. Like, how do we identify things is what matters to me. Not that there happens to be a causal chain of reference. Okay. In the case of fictional characters, it is a matter of debate whether the entities in question exist or not. If they exist as possibilia that we discover or as actual abstract artifacts that we create, the Million View is on sturdy ground. There are references to which the chain of reference leads. If they do not exist, more will need to be said by the Million in order to account for what is going on in the case of apparent reference to such entities. Yeah, so like if I talk about Santa Claus, and I mean the real fucking Santa Claus who delivers presents to kids on Christmas, well, that doesn't exist. And so how am I talking about this thing that doesn't exist? It's kind of weird. Yeah, Latvian says, okay, so this is, do fictional characters exist? Well, we haven't gotten out of the first fucking paragraph yet. So that's the introduction. We're still just talking about how they exist. Like, if we think they exist, and then how do we refer to them? But we're still in the first paragraph. Do counterfactuals exist? Well, we talk about them, K-pars. Now, do you think, like, there are different possible worlds out there where things are, like, could have been otherwise? Like, I, instead of this hand being thumbs up, in another world I put thumbs down. In the other world it was thumbs down first, then thumbs up. I don't think so, but like, yeah. If counterfactuals don't exist, would the world be unchanged? Very well done. Okay, there, K-pars. The ponder like Jesus. Well, what do you mean like Jesus? Like there is very likely a historical person that like was Jesus from 2,000 years ago. Was that person the like savior of the world as like the Messiah? That's a different question. But like so here we go again. Exactly, how do you? But like, yeah, there was a person, but like that's no different from saying Abraham Lincoln was a person too. So it's like, what do you exactly mean? Or do you mean like Jesus is more like Santa, where it had like magical powers? Latvian says, but Santa, the mythology and story, exist in a heavily taken for granted, investigated sense of that word. Yeah, so, or uninvestigated. So that's part of the issue here. Like, they exist, like, if you're not talking about Santa as a real thing, you're talking about Santa as a myth. Well, the myth exists. There's no question of that. Viper says, I'm not so sure there was a person. I am perfectly okay if there's historical research saying there wasn't. I'm just going off what I think the history of it is. That we think there was probably a guy named Jesus or close enough. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not Christian, never was. So I don't, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's just it might as well be a myth to me as it is, but like, take it as you will. Like, it's not, it won't make any difference. We can use Santa Claus. We can use like flying reindeer for this story. You can use the Loch Ness Monster. You can use the Tooth Fairy. Whatever you want. Like, have at it. Like, we can use Cthulhu. We can use all of this stuff. Yeah. So traditionally, millions have had trouble dealing with anti-realism about fictional characters. How do you refer to something that doesn't exist in the real world? Ponder says, I definitely mean the magical variety. Yeah, that's fine. But like, we use Santa Claus. I use Santa Claus usually because there's less confusion about, well, there's less baggage with Santa Claus, you know? Sorry, Corn. I didn't mean to trigger you. Or Globus, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult the gods. I apologize. The only one, the only god I accept is Sithrak, an insane god for a mad world. Okay? It's the only one I do. Viper says, in 2,000 years, you could look at the Harry Potter books and find all these references and stuff proven to have existed through archaeological evidence. That doesn't mean a wizard named Harry Potter existed. Yeah, well, it's one, you know, the funny thing is there's probably plenty of people in England named Harry Potter. It's probably a common enough name. So it's like, could there have been a guy that did this? Now, did Jesus do the miracles that they say Jesus did? Probably not. I mean, I'm not a believer. I'm not like in a position to claim anything about this. But like, I'm not worried about there being a guy named Jesus. Like, that doesn't really matter to me. Like, it was just some guy. Pharaoh says, as a Scot, Loch Ness is also real. Well, the Loch, of course Loch Ness is real, but is Nessie real? The monster. I'm sure there's a Loch Ness. Okay, so yeah. Here, the author will access the plausibility of one realist view, a simple bare-bones version of abstract artifact theory, which they will call bare-bones artifactualism. Okay, so we're going to talk about monsters for real, 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 for real? No cap? Okay, what is bare bones artifactualism? According to bare bones artifactualism, the abstract artifacts are simple abstract counters. Each of these simple abstract counters has only those intrinsic properties that other such simple abstract counters also have, except for one distinct intrinsic property. This one distinctive intrinsic property is a number-bearing property that marks out the abstract counter's identity, distinct from all other such abstract counters. What the flying fuck is this author going on? So like we're gonna have like Santa number 15 or something? Like what are we talking about here? Boneless pizza? Yeah, don't put bones on your pizza. Well, actually, maybe like some bone marrow would be good. Ooh, bone marrow pizza. I'm sure it's been done. I may have even had that. Sounds good though. All right. On account of this one distinctive intrinsic property, the abstract counters might be described as quasi-counters, given that unlike idealized concrete counters, they are not indiscernible in their intrinsic properties. What in the fuck? All right, well, yeah, we're going to have to get through this. I don't know what this author is on. However, I will not describe them as quasi-counters, but rather counters, because it seems to me that their closeness to concrete counters is sufficient to justify categorizing them under that term. The one distinctive intrinsic property, the number-bearing property, allows for us to do with the abstract counters what spatio-temporal situatedness allows us to do with concrete counters. That is to say, the number-bearing property allows us to treat abstract counters as individuals. Okay, this is hexaity. Hexaity is just a unique property of being a unique thing. They're just calling this a counter and giving everything an identification number. So Santa has a unique fingerprint, which we're calling a counter here. So there's a Santa fingerprint, and we're going to use that as the thing that Santa is. Okay. Anchovies? What? Oh, anchovies on pizza? I've eaten it. It's okay. Your friends of Scotland says Loch Ness is not real. That's interesting. Viper says Santa 69 sounds like White Zombie Christmas album. Yeah, exactly. Iterations like The Heretic. I don't know what that is, but okay. Imaginary numbers. Yeah. Hexaity. Oh, yeah. This is anchovies make your pizza not boneless. Aha! You are right, Frank. Hexaity. I think this is how you spell it. Actually, it's old. It's the old Latin. There were two properties things could have: hexaity and equidity. Equidity is thatness. It's the type of thing something is. So, like, I'm human, you're human. We have the quiddity of being like humans. Hexaity makes me individual. It's the unique property of being the individual that, like, the unique individual that I am. So I have a unique hexaity that's different from your hexaity, but we might have a similar quiddity, a thatness, as opposed to a specific thisness, which is the hexaity. So we're giving everything an identification number. We're giving that intrinsic property. It's a hexaity. That's all that's going on here. People think we have moved on from like stuff from like 1,000 years ago. Or the medievals, like 500-600 years ago. No, we haven't. We think we're clever. This is all, like, they're being clever here, but like this is just hexaity with like dressed up with numbers. Yeah, and hexaity, oh my. Quiddity is qualia, hexaity, oh my. Yeah, exactly. K-Pars and Vipers teamed up for the win. Thisness and whatness. Yeah, Dojo. This is metaphysics for you. Okay. It is commonly thought that abstract objects cannot be distinct duplicates. See, distinctness is coming in. See, this is unlike concrete objects. I accept that this probably this is probably the case. So it is not possible for abstract objects to be perfect counters. So you can't be perfectly unique because, you know, everyone's got like their own idea of like Santa and shit because there is no one thing out there. So they're saying, okay, we're going to hand wave this. You can't be perfect counters on the model of concrete counters where perfect counter is taken to be objects indistinguishable in their intrinsic properties. So the simple abstract counters are nearly indiscernible insofar as their intrinsic properties are concerned. Where the counters differ is in their extrinsic properties. These can be derived from an account of our use of them. See, everyone uses the Santa similarly, but not exactly the same. And by counter, the author means simple object, indiscernible in its intrinsic properties from other such simple objects, that it is used for tracking certain contextually determined factors in a mutually understood format, as in a game or in our ordinary tracking considerations about human society. Yeah, so it's a fingerprint or stamp that we understand goes like identifies this thing. That's what is going on here. Can we all agree coat red, beard white? Yeah, exactly. But see, that would be the counter. You break that all that stuff Corwin down, and that would make whatever the properties are of like Santa. And of course, if you look at historical Santa, that's not the same thing. Modern Santa, I think, is a creation of the Coca-Cola Corporation, like the soda company. They used that version in advertising, and I think they basically like had a copyright on that. Yeah, thank you, Vipers. So it's like that red coat, beard white, like jolly fat man sort of look is a Coke ad. Selling drugs. Okay. 2. Is the ontology of bare-bones artifactualism strange? Against the view that the ontology of bare-bones artifactualism using abstract counters is strange, I'll present 3 considerations that give us good reason to believe in such an ontology. Its simplicity, its parallels in other practices, and its explanatory promise. I will address each of these in turn, giving greatest attention to parallels in our other practices and explanatory promise. 2.1. Laughing Jesus says, do you mean Santa or St. Nicholas, right? Yes. This is the issue. This is what is actually at issue, is that what do we actually mean when we are referring to these fictional characters? Because different people like refer in different ways. And so we're trying to get a fingerprint of what the idea is so that we can narrow it down. And the idea is that if we can talk in this sort of like abstract fingerprint of ideas, then we can like identify we have a reference that everyone can use to like when we say Santa that we're all using. It's going to be contentious at points, but like that's the idea going on here. Vipers gives us history. In 1931, Coca-Cola commissioned Hadan Sundblom to create a series of images featuring Santa Claus for their holiday advertisements. His illustrations depict a Santa enjoying Coca-Cola, showing a warm, friendly, and approachable version of the holiday figure. What's up, Adam? Tuned in? Yeah, and of course wearing, that's why it's red and white. It's the Coca-Cola colors. I never put that together. That makes a lot of sense, though. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, how's it going, Adam? Okay, so bare-bones artifactualism is ontologically simple. This is what I call the simplicity advantage. The proposed ontology is far simpler and therefore more plausible than the ontology of other versions of artifactualism. There are existent abstract counters, but their intrinsic properties are very simple and they are uniform in the simplicity. They are not spooky because they are so simple in their intrinsic properties. Our ontology is minimal and plausibly expanded by acceptance of their existence in keeping with the principle of parsimony. Yeah, so if you make a minimal sort of fingerprint of ideas that like surround Santa Claus, that's the idea. It's minimal. Okay. Counter use is familiar from other areas of life. Bare bones of artifactualism using counters is plausible because there are analogies for such counter use in other areas of human activity, notably in games. When humans involve themselves in games, which may be very complex, they tend to have counters that they use to individuate possessors for the various properties in operations in those games. So they're role playing. So you have like the counter for your intelligence, your charisma, your strength. This is what they're talking about. BC, simple properties that you're associating with like a wizard. Like Santa's basically a wizard that like delivers presents. So Santa's wizard properties would be very high, but that's the kind of counter they're talking about here. Okay, so role RPG. They're RPGing the world. That's all it is. Okay. Moreover, in games, there is typically some board space or playing area within which the counters interact. We place counters on a board or cards on a table. Such areas which are of significance to the use of counters in the game are temporally extended. The counters enter them at a certain point in time and leave at another. They are also more obviously spatially extended, allowing for various relations within that space settled by the rules of the game. For example, counters sometimes preclude co-occupation of a square on a board, as in backgammon or chess. At other times, counters can co-occupy a square on the board, as in certain versions of Parcheesi, in which counters from the same team can co-occupy. Yeah, so again, this is an RPG version of the world, and you can have multiple properties, and so you can have a spatially located property. In some cases, that doesn't mean you can't be in two places at once, or two things can't be in the same place at the same time. It's like you can imagine that in an RPG. Yeah. K-pars are like the principal magnetic azimuthal and spin numbers. This is exactly, you see where they're going, K-pars. This isn't crazy, but then again, is this actually how the world is? And is this a good idea in the end? Is it? To like, this is how fictional things are? Is everything an RPG to you? Is it? Like, does that mean everything is? Yeah, exactly, Corwin. So now you're understanding. You can have different names that fall under the same counter. You can have different properties of the counters like overlap, like different RPG properties. So this isn't stupid. This is clever. I just don't know if it's a good idea in the end, but it's very clever. Like, good job, philosopher. You're very clever. Globus says, how can you be in two places at once when you're not anywhere at all? Well, you can imagine, Globus. We're talking about fictional entities. You are being two places in the fictional world at once. You can do that in fictional worlds. You may not do that in the real world, but in a fictional world, you may have no problem being in two places at once. Like, what's it called? There was a bad guy in X-Men where he robbed like 12 banks at once, and then so he tried to get away with it because I couldn't possibly have been in 12 banks at once but he could split versions of himself. So it's like, yeah, in that world you're real. Okay. I know that was meant to be a joke, Globus. I'm sorry I'm ruining your joke, but I'm a philosopher. We do that to jokes sometimes. Okay, it should not be thought that the counter use is confined to the concrete. Consider two chess players playing chess without a board. The game still takes place with counters with various extrinsic encoded properties. For example, the knight moves in an L shape, the bishop diagonally. But it takes place abstractly. Such chess is sometimes said to be played in the head, and by this is meant that it is played abstractly. The two players take it in turns to say their moves: c4, e6, knight to f3, d5, and so on. When one plays or attempts to play such chess, one is aware of abstract counters and an abstract board space within which they operate. Blindfold chess, as sometimes known, has a long history. Murray records that Ruy Lopez played it in Spain in the 16th century, and it probably goes back much further. Oh, you loved it? Okay, good. K-par says, like parametrization of thing, or you can have describable you can just have describable parametrization. Yes, we're giving everything properties. We're RPGing the fuck out of the world, and the realness will then just like, if it's in the real world, you're just gonna have an indicator that you're gonna have like a parameter. I can speak. Parameter that is real versus another world, which then it'll have a different fictional world parameter. And that's all that would be the difference between things in this world and things in a different world. And everything will have a parameter. So that's right. Frank says, obviously someone with shape-shifting technology pirated Frank's shape. Yeah, that's probably it. I wonder, K-Pars didn't even get there. I wonder how virtuality comes into that. Possibly related things. They're just different worlds. The actual world is just a parameter. The actuality operator. I mean, we use this in modal logic. There's an actuality operator to talk about what's happening in this world as opposed to any other possible world, any other possible situation. For people who don't like possible world talk, just think of there's other situations that didn't obtain. They could have obtained, like, however you want to think about that, and the one that did obtain, you're just marking with an actual world. It's an @ symbol a lot of times. So it's just this world is just a parameter at this point. Yep. The same game abstraction can be achieved for simpler games. The same abstract use of counters in board space can be achieved, for example, by children playing noughts and crosses. So that's X's and O's, tic-tac-toe. All it requires is some familiarity with the game. It seems probable that a person could play the abstract version of noughts and crosses, though probably not chess due to the relative complexity of the game, without ever having seen a concrete board space or a set of counters. Yeah, you could play X's and O's or tic-tac-toe in your head. It's not hard. The widespread and commonsensically recognized occurrence of such concrete and abstract counter use in human life is a reason to view the further occurrence of abstract counter use for fictional characters as plausible. It may be that in the history of human evolution and or the course of human maturation from childhood to adulthood, either concrete or abstract counter use precedes the other. My guess is that concrete counter use precedes abstract counter use, both in the... Thank you, Sign, for the follow. My guess is that concrete counter use precedes abstract counter use both in the history of human evolution and in the course of human maturation, but this is an area for further consideration and one that is likely to be heavily dependent on empirical investigation. In any case, concrete counter use preceding abstract counter use or vice versa would not, as far as I can see, diminish the plausibility of fictional characters being simple abstract counters. Yeah, what's up, Sign? Welcome in. So, okay, this is some bullshit right here. Like, this just annoyed me. I was reading it and I just got distracted because I was like, this is what they're trying to be like, well, this could be real and we would have to go like empirically investigate like if this actually happens. There is no question that we can do this sort of thing. We can make like a RPG parametrization of however many things we want and, you know, write it down on a piece of paper, all the properties of your body, all the properties of your life, blah, 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 and then do the same thing with like Sherlock Holmes. And then they're saying, well, of course we do this and we can and we have. And they're saying, well, that makes it real. This doesn't make it real. This just means this is something we can do. It's part of our cultural history. I don't know how great, like, this is not an actual argument that it is fundamental. It is only an argument that this is something we can do, but they hand wave at this because they want to at least try to ground it. This is a minor gripe, really. K-Par says, if every thought supervenes on a physical state, aren't all imagined things real? The chess game is a brain state. So, that assumes that, I mean, that's one version of the brain. So it's like, yeah, that's one version of mentality. Not everyone accepts that. So like the dumb answer to what you're saying is like, yes, that's correct under one version of the world. That version is like pretty, like it's popular. Like it's the Ivan Neo, our brain just makes abstractions. We're just parameterizing or whatever. And like, this is what's going on. There's other views out there in philosophy. That's like sort of a scientific perspective that like, this is just kind of like, if you're taking the brain as making abstractions on everything, sure. That may not be the best way to think about stuff all the time though. Like that is a good scientific point of view, but like, yeah, is everything in our head treated as abstract? That isn't how we treat everything in our head. We don't see the abstractions. We like experience the world as we do. And so is it going to be good phenomenology? No. Is it going to be playing better with science? Yes. Like what's your goal with how you describe your experience? And so it's like you have to be careful there. Then everything in the world is a brain state because, well, that's what else would it be? But like, I don't think that captures all the relevant phenomena all the time, or at least not yet. So Sockno says it seems more like a fringe philosophy attempt to connect theology and philosophy into one thing. Well, as I was just talking to K-Par Socknow, there is a school of like sort of scientific school of thought where the brain is sort of abstracting away from everything in the world. And so you can fit this model into the scientific worldview. So it's not that fringe. So like, it's not like so far off, but then again, the most they can do here is just sort of hand wave at like, well, you could go look to see if it's actually in the brain. And that's what they were just doing. And that's kind of why I pointed this out right here, because I was like, well, they're just making it up that this is what's going on. They don't know. They said we could look. It's like, yeah, maybe we'll find something. Who knows? Okay, Pars. Well, that's fine. I appreciate it. But like, it's a good point. If other people are like, well, is this a nutty idea? Well, it fits in with a more general scientific worldview if you want it to. Okay. Counter use has explanatory promise. As said, counter use is ontologically simple and familiar from other areas of human life. Yeah, see, like they're trying to like, look, we do this all the time. You have like grocery lists if you can afford groceries nowadays. It's like you have all these things. You have like properties of things you pick out in the world. We do this constantly. Okay, but what explanatory work does counter use do? Counter use provides a solution to a coordination problem. The problem of how we organize our considerations of and discussions about fictional entities. Positing counters goes a long way to explaining how we achieve, where fiction is concerned, the kind of multi-character, multi-property, multi-event tracking that we do. Yeah, so you can just think about, this is Twitch, think about any RPG video game where you have characters that you have like, you can do the traditional fantasy thing where you have like the elf, the wizard, the hobbit, like the dwarf, whatever, like the human, and all of them have different properties, all different things, and that's how you organize your world in like these different things with different properties, and that's how you tell a story, and that's how you track what's going on. You break stuff down in this way. Viper says, neuroscience says that we hallucinate reality based on real inputs, but reality is ultimately a creation of minds. Yeah, so this is the scientific neuroscience-y point of view where everything is this sort of projection of numbers and properties onto the world. Again, we don't experience it as a hallucination. We experience this as reality. Maybe that is just a false way of looking at the world, but like that is just, we have to accept it. That's where we're at. We don't accept what we're saying as, oh, this is just a creation of my mind. I mean, maybe you do sometimes, but not always. Like, so again, what is the phenomena that we're tracking here? Latvian says, reality is calcium ions passing through the cell walls of neurons to create a polarized exchange. Yeah, charge. Yeah, see, again, we don't experience calcium ions. Like, that's not how we experience reality. Like, when was the last time you were like, ooh, there goes that calcium ion. Felt real good. Or that calcium ion was like, a pretty picture. Like, look at those calcium ion anime girl boobs or whatever. Like, the two things don't connect. You're like, either you find something sexy, you're not thinking calcium ions unless you are, calcium ion sexual, which is fine. But, yeah. Exactly, Vipers. Now, it's like the dress is a great example. That's one of the reasons why I have my duck rabbit. Is like, this is the fucking point. Things are illusions, and it matters how you look at the world. Do you see a duck or a rabbit in my chat right now? And like, the dress is an example, blue and black or white and gold. There's ways we are conditioned to see the world, and we don't treat it as a hallucination. There are multiple ways we could be interpreting stuff. Exactly, Latvian. Just, yeah, your sodium potassium pumps are running so hard right now. Yeah, you're all excited. So that's the issue. It's like, yeah, you can do the sciencey thing. Like, how do your eyes and brain process the color? Sure. That doesn't help us explain the world, though. It helps you explain the brain, not like our experience of the world and what's going on. Doherty says, I'm compiling examples of what I call the misuse of merely, and this feels like one. You can't analyze standard by enumerating its properties. There are just too many relationships going on. That's fair, but on the flip side, the world's complicated and everything we do is going to inherently be sort of a simplification. Everything everywhere we talk about is a simplification. Can you actually describe everything that's happening on the screen right now? On like that you're watching my stream, everything I'm saying, all the things going on. You can describe some of it. It's all going to be a simplification. And like, it's not actually like, is that really that bad? We're never going to capture all of our reality. That's not what we actually can do. So I don't like, yes, you are correct, but like, what is the consequence of that like statement? Sure, we never capture all of our reality, but we can't, and we never could. It's like, yeah. K-Par says, we can't handle the whole amount of information there is out there. Senses filter out stuff we don't have attention on, and then our brains put together disparate inputs in a predictive model to help us solve problems. Yeah, so that's the more scientific-y version, that like it's helping us due to evolutionary filters to try to get the most evolutionarily relevant stuff. Sure. We evolve to survive, not understand things at a holistic level. Yes. Yeah, again, Ponder Monkey is on the same track. K-Par says, what if I do the Dennett argument and go asking if you can enumerate properties of Santa Claus, I take it. The question that exists to be enumerated. Things just click off for a sec. All right, I hope it's okay. I don't know. K-Pars, go right ahead and do it. I can't remember what the Dennett argument is, so I don't know what it is right now, and so I don't know. Yeah. The subconscious deals with it all. Does it? Does it, Ponder Monkey? How would you know? You assume it does, but I don't think this, like, okay, put it this way. I take it you have a hand if you can type in chat, or there's some way you interface with chat. Like, you don't need a hand, of course. You could have, like, do some other thing. You could do, like, voice to text or whatever it is. That interface is not going to be part of your subconscious. Like, I can type. Your hand has feedback in itself. That's not a subconscious thing, or maybe that's what you call by it. But, like, there's a way your hand moves that you can make the words come out faster. You don't think about that, but it's like, is there subconscious in your hand that helps you type or move the mouse? Like, it gets massively weird. And the idea that, like, the subconscious covers everything, no, it doesn't. Like, your interface with the world is limited and self-selective and all sorts of interesting relationships. So it's like, you can't say the subconscious deals with everything. It's a very weird thing. We don't have it all worked out yet. Okay. Oh, then it begs the question. Okay. So yes, autocorrect does suck for philosophy streams. So like, YouTube makes, transcriptions, it text to, voice to text. And it's pretty good, but there's so many technical words here that it screws it up. But it's actually very good. I've had people from other languages try to understand what I was saying. I was like, oh, just turn on the text to speech. And they were really happy because it catches most of what I'm saying pretty accurately. Dogen says, is the game of chess fully analyzed just by knowing how the pieces move? This way, this is a misuse of merely. You can describe far more if you look at all possible openings and the consequence of those patterns, and is more descriptive of an emergent property of the game itself. That's fair. But, like, again, you can merely describe all the possible moves at any given point. The legal moves. That would be an okay use, but do you understand chess at that point? Of course not. But, like, then the use of merely is kind of relative. But, like, fair point. Santa Vegas is your new band? Cool. Ponder says, all the little things we ignore and filter out are not ignored. Well, yeah, but we can't even tell how much of that stuff exists. It's all, like, filtered out, and some of it is definitely ignored. Not even, there's stuff that's going to be not known, stuff that is, like, filtered out and ignored, stuff that's filtered out and might exist somewhere in our subconscious, and then stuff that actually gets to our, like, conscious thought. But, like, I don't think, I mean, how would we even know that, like, we're getting all the information? Like, I don't understand what that even would mean to get all the information. I can only see in a certain range of light. I can only experience certain sorts of things, like, by touch. Like, there's other things out there. Zach, what's up? YouTube CC's loves Foucault? Sure. How you doing, Zach? You know, I rarely get a chance to shout out Zach. Let's give Zach a shout out. How you doing, Zach? If you don't know Zach talks like politics and just like smart stuff over on stream. Streams long time during the day. Sometimes I lurk over there. I should be giving other people shout outs. I'm sorry, but it's like, yeah, go give Zach a follow. Good guy. Keeper said, I think he's talking about the hard problem of consciousness begs the question that there's a problem to solve. That is what he says. It's like asking how Santa delivers all his present one night assumes that merits explanation. Yeah, I mean, that is Dennis' position, but that doesn't mean you can't explain how we talk about Santa. So this is a slightly different problem. It's not that we say Santa is real. No one thinks that. The question is, how do we talk about things that don't exist in our reality, and how do we make sense of them? So in this case, we're saying there's some sort of like abstract fingerprint of numbers and properties that go together that give Santa the unique fingerprint of being Santa. Yeah. I mean, and we can do that because we do talk about Santa. We could also do that for consciousness, but would that consciousness be what is actually in our heads? That's a completely separate problem. Then it would say no. Like if you're saying that's what consciousness is, or then it would say the scientific viewpoint given a worked out neuroscience, that would be the correct thing. We don't have that yet though. K-Bar says we have a short loop that keeps around 20 seconds. Yeah, so that's how much we have in the active memory stuff. Yeah. Okay, I don't know enough of the neuroscience to like solve the problem, Ponder Monkey. I'm sure we don't like the idea that we see everything though. There's just too much information. I don't like I can't accept that though. Okay. Malcolm Gladwell's knowing his perception. Okay, I don't know what that is. Yeah. Zach loves Kant. Yes. Okay. Zach says, all good. I should be asleep, but I don't know. Debating libs on Discord in text since I joined Silly YouTube's Discord in there. So obviously, so oblivious. You don't know why. I just felt like, yeah. Resident sleeper. Go for it, dude. Yeah. There's so much to debate nowadays. It's like, I don't want to do it. I don't have time. Okay, so let's get this done. We're just got a few more pages, and I've been ranting a lot. Okay, imagine games of snakes and ladders, known as Moksha Patam in the original Indian version. Is that like Chutes and Ladders? Okay, without counters, but with the aspects of the game that are brought about by the properties intrinsically or extrinsically possessed by counters in the normal game still in operation. All right, think about any board game. How would we coordinate such a complicated activity without individuals to affix properties? Yeah, so you've got your characters moving along the game board. In normal snakes and ladders, a counter has various extrinsic properties provided by the game. When a die is rolled, it moves forward the relevant number of squares. When it lands a square with a snake or a ladder, it respectively descends or ascends the board. When it reaches the end of the board, it results in victory for the associated player. Yeah, so you've got locations and then like warps between spots. Yeah, I'm glad, Ponder Monkey. Try to make some of this crazy stuff make some sense. A version of snakes and ladders without the property bearing, including spatiotemporal situatedness provided by individual counters, is either impossible or beyond ordinary human capabilities. See, what the fuck is that beyond ordinary human capabilities? Yeah, you need to be able to locate things on the game board. Otherwise, you have no game. It's not beyond ordinary human capabilities. It doesn't exist then in any sense if you take away the one thing it had. Author says, I'm not sure which of these is the case, but we'll outline the two possibilities that they envisage. It may be impossible. It may be that without individual counters to bear the relevant properties, it would not be possible for the imitated game to functionally resemble the original. Yet look, if all the game has is the game board and the game pieces, and you take that away, there's nothing left. Maybe something, yeah, see, what would there be? I don't understand. If you need the game board. K-Par says, but the rules of the game versus playing it just seem like a virtual actual thing. Well, no, they're taking away. There's like so the rules of Chutes and Ladders or Snakes and Ladders would be that you move a certain amount of spaces on the board. There is no board anymore, so how would you know where you were? How would you play? So it's like the idea that like, oh, this is beyond our capabilities. No, you eliminated the one thing you needed. So I'm going with the impossible here. I don't see what like other possibility there exists. An idiot savant of board game, says the Ponder Monkey. Something like that. But like I feel like this is where the author is getting into like massive hand waving, because if you have created something, it's like Sherlock Holmes, but there's no London in the story. So it's like Sherlock Holmes is somehow solving mysteries, but there's no location. Like there's no city of London. There's no Baker Street. There's no other people there. It's like, what the fuck does that mean? There's no story left. You need the location. You need something. Yeah, so now they say, alternatively, it may simply be beyond ordinary human capabilities. It may be that even if it is possible for some other kind of being, our own capabilities are outmatched by the prospect of playing a version of the game that does not include individual counters to bear the relevant properties. Yeah, you're playing the game without the game. There is nothing else except for the rules and the game board in the game. Like, what do you think is going on here, author? On balance, I think it is probably impossible for there to be a version of Snakes and Ladders functionally identical to Snakes and Ladders and lacking the counters, but I am unsure on this point. In any case, certainty about this is not needed for their point about the plausibility of such a version of the game to go through. Yeah, that's why they're trying to make something out of this here. Summonon quotes, once upon a time there was a guy named Schmurlock Gnomes. He solved mysteries. End quote. Poof. Story without location. Yeah. You know, this is kind of like the Jabberwocky, where everything kind of sounds like words you think you know, and that like draws upon concepts you already have. So it's like we are going to project into that story. Very cute though. But like you're still drawing upon like concepts that exist. You have to still be able to place that somewhere within like your pantheon of like characters in your head. So cute, but like it still has the properties associated with it. Kapar says, okay, yeah, so then it's just not identical to itself. Yeah. If you take away everything that it had, which a game, all it has is the rules, the game board, and the pieces, ain't nothing left. Adam says, do you necessarily need a board? How about conceptual rules using a defined notion of length and space? Can't we imagine tic-tac-toe without actual drawings? Yes, absolutely. But if I say there is no first box in the upper left because there are no numbers and there's no spaces identifiable with tic-tac-toe, there is no upper left anymore. There is no center box. There is no properties because there are no counters. There are no like middle box, like 1 through 9, number them. Those don't exist anymore. There are no 1 through 9 boxes. You lose the board. You lose the whole thing. It's like, and the author's trying to say, oh, maybe it exists for some other things. Like, no, you just deleted all the things. You've deleted the program, and you're like, well, does the program still exist? No, it's gone. Like, there is no more program to talk about. Kapar says, reverse thesis, how much can you remove and still a ship? Yeah, but in this case, they removed everything. It's like you deleted it. Doger says, it's making me feel slightly intoxicated. Bong rip. Hey, man, what if there were no fictional characters, man? Kind of. I mean, this is why I'm complaining about it here. I'm like, this part's not great. Like, the rest of it's like, I got you. Like, you're RPGing the entire universe. Cool. Like, whatever. This is like, well, what if you take away all the RPG mechanics from the game? Do you still have an RPG? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what? Okay. Yeah, exactly. Ponder, the concept of game. Adam says, so he's saying the program without a defined set of rules doesn't exist ontologically. Sorry, I came late. Yeah, this is the problem. This part's not, I don't like this part right here. They were basically making the entire story of like the world like algorithmically or like an RPG where everything has objects and properties and you can like assign stuff, and we're calling these counters that you could like, you know, input into maybe an algorithm at some point. So it's like, yeah, but if you then take away all the algorithms and all the counters, do you still have anything? And the answer is no. If you take away all the algorithms and the properties and all the variables, you don't have a program anymore. Okay, now imagine a novel in which there are no fictional characters, no counters to keep track of. I do not mean a novel in which various bits of speech and or descriptions are available, and the reader is challenged to gather them into word-resembling arrangements, and then does so by inventing individuals to which attribute the various group patterns of speech and description. I mean something far more challenging. I mean a novel in which, at the outset, the reader has her capacity to track individual entities frozen. This is even stranger than the imitated version of Snakes and Ladders. This is what I was saying. Imagine Sherlock Holmes without London. Imagine Sherlock Holmes without Sherlock Holmes or Watson. It's like, what do you mean? There's no story left. Author says, it is hard to see how such a novel could be produced, let alone allow for our varied achievements in thought and discussion about fictional entities. Yeah. So I guess their whole point was, if you take everything away from my account, then you don't have the thing anymore. Like a negative theology of fictional entities. I mean, okay, but like there's a lot of things you can do to trip up any sort of account and be like, hey, you didn't like listen to what I was saying and now you can't think anymore. It's like, come on, man. Is that like a negative argument here? Okay. Yeah. Adam says agreement is key. What if I say let's play a game where no counters exist, no moves, no goals, the counter the game we would do is nothing? Is that still a game? So far, a game is only about agreement. That's right. But like, see, now I think what their end point was like, well, if you do take away everything that I said, then you don't have a game anymore. It's like, sure, but that also doesn't mean that you may have taken away something necessary or something essential. That doesn't mean what the author has explained here is everything that the fictional entity is. It doesn't mean it's got all the important stuff. It just means it's taken away something critical. And it's like, well, sure, you've taken away something critical, but does that mean you've actually captured the relevant concepts? No. Play the quiet game, yeah. Someone's got a parent or has to deal with little kids. We're going to play the quiet game now. Okay. Objection. Is there an explanatory drawback concerning authorial creativity due to the simplicity of the counters? All versions of artifactualism have what I call the creativity advantage, which anti-realist and Mainongian realist accounts do not. On artifactualist views, the creator of a fictional character can genuinely be credited with having created something. Bare bones artifactualism retains this advantage. However, there is a caveat. Such simple artifactualism may be seen as having this advantage to a lesser degree than versions of artifactualism that situate the created artifact as a more complicated object, one with more intrinsic properties. Simple abstract counters may not, on the face of it, appear to be the kind of thing that authors create. It may seem that what authors actually create are more complex, intrinsically characterful abstract objects. Okay, that's fair. You can break down characters into their like RPG properties like intelligence, wisdom, like strength, blah, blah, blah. But there's usually more to it than that. And so reducing it to just these properties, is that really sufficient? Legit question. This is not a major drawback for bare bones artifactualism because the apparently missing explanatory work can be done by extrinsic properties. Imagine someone saying as a challenge to the bare bones artifactualist, quote, simple abstract counters do not sound at all like what I think of fictional characters as being, end quote. Let's call this the abstract counters are the wrong things objection. In answer to this objection, the bare bones artifactualist can simply reply, I don't think that anyone pre-reflectively has ordinary or special insight into the ontological status of fictional characters. In fact, the bare bones artifactualist is here using a defense that many artifactualists will probably adopt at some point in response to a slightly different objection. That objection is raised by Sainsbury as a concern about abstractness for artifactualism in general. Quote, on abstract artifact theories, fictional characters are just not the kinds of things we want them to be, end quote, because we do not think of fictional entities as abstract. Yeah, so is Sherlock Holmes a bundle of abstract properties? Not really, that's not how we think of it. But, like, that's how we do a lot of science. We think of like an electron as a bundle of abstract properties. So you can see where this guy's going, or I don't know, guy, whatever. Andrew Wynne Owen is going. Where Owen is going is that, look, what else are we talking about? A lot of times is you can add more onto the electron, but we're talking about a grouping of properties. Okay. In elaborating this objection, Sainsbury writes, authors who ought to know would fiercely resist the suggestion that the fictional characters are abstract. Abstract artifact theory entails that producers and consumers of fiction are sunk in error. Let us call this supporting point the error hypothesis. Sainsbury makes a normative claim about the authorial knowledge ought to know, but the error hypothesis might also be couched as a simple statement of what is probable. It seems probable that authors are not mistaken about fictional characters in this way. So there are normative and probabilistic versions of the error hypothesis. I will focus on the authorial rather than the readerly aspect of the error hypothesis because it seems to me that when the hypothesis is raised, it is to authors rather than readers that greater knowledge about what is going on with fictional entities is likely to be attributed. Someone says abstract meaning is timelessness plus immaterial. So what do we mean by abstract? I don't usually mean timeless and immaterial. I usually mean simplified, actually. So you can say like gravity. We know gravity nowadays is a curvature of space-time that follows complex math that interacts with all sorts of stuff. You can also talk about gravity as, shit falls down. Like, so it's like, okay, there, my pen fell, and you could probably see it for a half second on the screen. So is abstract timeless in that case? Well, kind of. I'm saying shit falls down. That's timeless and immaterial, but I'm just saying it's sort of a simplified description of reality that ignores all, like a huge amount of the contingent factors of the day. So yes, timeless and immaterial, but I think that misses the point. Abstract is a gross simplification that we can understand easily. That's it. Oh. back. Cool. Yeah, I mean, we use these words abstract, like, you can abstract from, like, you can give a mathematical model of something, a scientific model of something in the world, mathematical description of, like, a sphere or whatever. And you could say they are timeless and immaterial, but, like, you're doing it for a specific purpose. You're giving a model of, like, gravity. You're giving a mathematical description of, like, a curve. You're not doing it to make it timeless and immaterial. You're doing it as a simplification or some sort of way you can, like, understand it. Like with mathematics, you're doing it in a way that you can understand it using mathematical tools of the day. Yeah, see, I don't like essence either, for that matter, Ponder Monkey, because that would be like more the timeless existing out in the universe in some fancy way. Again, I'm just saying, look, this is a simplified way we can describe the world. Like, if you give a mathematical description of something, you're giving a mathematical description of that in a way that uses math in a way that we can, like, process. Like, it's a way that we can then do further math on, like, a curve. Like, we can understand the properties of it using the mathematical tools of the day that we understand. So it's like, well, what is this stuff? I just see it as, technology in some sense. Adam says, is there a rule for an abstract? Cartoon of Einstein works, but why a rule of character? I'm not sure what that question is. What do you mean a rule for an abstract? I don't know what that means. It's going to be like what people are trying to accomplish is usually defines the abstractions. Because what you're doing when you abstract is you're ignoring certain things. And whatever you're ignoring, that's going to really determine what you're up to. So in science, like say in physics, you're simplifying the problem. You say, okay, we're going to try to use a point mass. There is no point mass that we deal with in reality. You're dealing with masses like, a pencil. It has shape. It has weight or mass, whatever it is. There is no point mass, but like you can treat it like a point when dropping it because it's simplified. It's easy enough. But that's only to deal with it in physics. You are ignoring, say, that it's orange. This orange thing. If we needed to say, hey, you know what the fruit is that's the same color as this, well, then the color matters. Color doesn't matter in like physics, unless you're doing like optics, of course. But like in terms of gravity, color means nothing in terms of gravity. So it has to do with like what your goal is. Adam says, fitting to pick out a character of the actual, which is too complex to understand for epistemic values of truth. Yeah. So that's what it is. What's the question? Are you looking for epistemic things, something to do with value in some other way? Truth, maybe? Yeah. But that's the question. There is only the universe. Yeah, and then there's all the bullshit we do. Okay, let's get through this. We only got 2 more pages. In answer to the error hypothesis, I say that I do not think that authors ought to know what the authors, are doing in this regard, nor is it probable that they know. Yeah, so this author, Owen here, don't give a shit. Like, look, you may think you're up to making stories, but really the abstractions are just these bundles of properties. K-Par says, putting constraints on the system to get out what you're interested in. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Okay, there is no special normativity and or likelihood for authors when it comes to knowing the reality status of fictional characters. In general, there are certain kinds of knowledge about the nature of the raw materials one is using in a project that are not required for successful completion of that project. For example, there are no special normativity and or likelihood for those working on many aspects of the construction of buildings to know, simply by dint of engaging in those activities, the chemical composition of the materials that they are using. It may be that modern workers in that field do come to possess such knowledge, either as a matter of interest or in support of specialized aspects of their work, but it's not relevant to large aspects of the fundamental activity. Yeah. So if you're making skyscrapers, do you have to know the properties of, some of the paints that you're using? Maybe some of it, but not all the chemicals that are going at it. So the author is like, well, look, you are making bundles of properties. That's just the underlying material, the metaphysics you're using. You don't, but no one has to know it. Okay. For most of human history, the vast majority of those working on the construction of buildings did not have such knowledge, and yet the construction of the buildings was achieved. I believe there's an analogy here with what authors do. In fact, I think the analogy is generalizable to other domains. Those working with certain raw materials where the work involves the arrangement of those raw materials in time and space and in other ways relative to one another, as in, for example, the social relations of a novel, typically are not likelier than the average person to know about the intrinsic nature of those raw materials. In general, I do not think that authors, mathematicians, or moralists have special insight into the debate about realism, anti-realism, and irrealism concerning the things with which they operate, be they fictional characters, numbers, or moral properties. These are distinctive philosophical questions, and they do not routinely arise in pursuit of the relevant practices, though they are surely of interest for those concerned with foundational issues related to those practices. Alright, so there's a lot of hand-waving going, look, y'all don't need to know metaphysics, but this is what's really going on. Trust me. This is what's really going on in the metaphysics, but you can go write your fiction novel without knowing the background philosophy. I mean, yes, but like that doesn't actually support the author's argument. That just means, yeah, other people don't know philosophy, which is true, but so what? Okay, conclusion. Author defended a view that I call, or they call, bare bones artifactualism, according to which the abstract artifacts created by the author are very simple. They are counters which are indiscernible insofar as their intrinsic properties are concerned. Where they differ is in their extrinsic properties. I said that I do not think the ontology of bare bones artifactualism using abstract counters strange. On the contrary, there is good reason to see it as what is going on. This is based on certain considerations about bare bones artifactualism. Its ontological simplicity, its parallels in our other practices, and its explanatory promise. Above all, I would like to emphasize the account's explanatory promise. Abstract counter use shows how we might be keeping track of many things we have to be keeping track of in order to achieve the kinds of thought about and discussion of fictional entities that we do achieve. Yeah. So you think about all the whatever properties Santa has. Caudillo, yes, philosophy is very hard. I then addressed an objection: is there any explanatory drawback for bare bones artifactualism relative to our other artifactualisms due to the simplicity of abstract counters? I said that the view that bare bones artifactualism is at a disadvantage here relative to more elaborate versions of artifactualism is based on the incorrect supposition that there are categories of person who have special insight, where the debate about realism arises into the ontological status of the objects of our thought and language. Yeah, so they're hardcore, like, no, this is what is the base metaphysics. This is what is really there, is just these abstract properties, whatever these counters are. Like everyone else is just sort of fooling themselves. It may be that the bare bones model of artifactualism that has been outlined here remains unpersuasive. There's more that might be said about counter use, but even an extended account might fail to convince the reader. For those who find even the existence of simple abstract counters implausible and yet also wish to retain the advantage, which is usually to preserve of the realist or realism of maintaining reference as something that we do in case of concerning fictional entities, Sainsbury's 2009 Irrealism is a good alternative view. Okie dokie. Yeah, so it's like if you want to be able to just be like, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about these abstract bundles of abstract properties. Okay, like that's fine. But here's what we do now. We rate the paper. And for people who are new here, thank you for the raid, of course, Globus and anyone else that came in. We use Better TTV emote, so you should be able to see them in chat. If you see just like the text in chat, you can install the Better TTV or like the Franker Face, whatevers, and everyone gets to use them. And by using the emotes in chat right now, you get to rate the paper. So if you think it was fun and made your brain dance, you can give it a brain dance. Spelling and capitalization do matter. Nog Scream, so you give it a scream for existential or artistic drama. Nog Aura for the Ouroboros for deep ancient ideas. Nog Knife for slicing and dicing arguments. Nog Navel for navel gazing only for academics. Nog Turd, all style no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog Grapes for big claims that shrivel up. You can also use the global vote yay and vote nay of Twitch, and I also have a vote meh. The stuff in green, I do calculate like an overall score, make the overall score go up. The ones in red make it go down, and the meh actually kind of pushes everything to the middle. Good discussion, says K-Pars. So Vipers gives it a meh, K-Pars gives it a lot of stuff, so thought it touched on a lot of topics. Dojo gives it a navel gazing. Yep, sure. Claudia says, I got an ad during stream. Oh, you got an ad during stream. That's so annoying. I have mid-roll ads turned off. I'm sorry about that. Since someone else gave it a double yay, they liked it. That's cool. Someone on also gave it navel gazing. So Caldeo again, had during streaming, it was Charles Barkley having a conversation with AI Charles Barkley bot, and it was kind of trippy. I've seen that one. I know what you're talking about. Lobus gave it a brain dance, a meh, navel gazing, and a turd. Not a turd, grapes. It shriveled up. That's fair. You know, I think that was like, it's a little bit of fun, but it was also kind of, you know, it had some good ideas. It's like, we're going to RPG the world. I know maybe that's not the best way of saying it, but you're going to talk about these bundles of properties that you can use as fingerprints, and that's how you reference them. Like, that's the references, this sort of like numerical matrix of properties. And it's like, okay, we can do that. Is this what we want to do? And then the author's just like, well, we can, and it's a good metaphysics. It's like, well, how much do we actually accept that? I don't know. So 2 yays and then like nog grapes because it didn't quite deliver. Yeah. Caldeo, yeah, it was a bit hard to follow. It's fair. Once we got past the beginning, like, I think it got a little bit into the weeds. So like, I'm gonna give it also a nog navel. Nog navel. I'm gonna give it 2. Actually, you can double up, and that kind of adds it up. From the Lily Gardener, yeah. So not great. Ponder Monkey thought it was a yay. Let's see. Yeah, you know what's funny? This is a weird paper. Like, so I'm going to give it 2 navels, a brain dance, and yeah, maybe a nog grapes, but I don't actually hate this paper. Like, this would be a kind of a cruddy thing. So, like, I'm going to give it, like, some vote mehs, I think, actually. Vote meh. Vote meh. So, like, I want this to be, it's kind of a mid paper. Like, it's all right. Like, it had some ideas. I think got represented by a lot of the stuff. And maybe, like, you know, what else should I give it? I feel like that's a little harsh on it. Yeah, I'll give it 1 vote, yay. So that'll put the score up. So, yeah. So you can double up on ratings, and that kind of just sort of adds to it. I don't know. Maybe I'll go back and edit my own because I can do that. But thank you all for rating. Get like anyone else wants to get in. 60 seconds left. Dogi says you need more context about what we're trying to accomplish with the counters. Okay, that's fair. At the very beginning of the paper, they said, well, how do we talk about these fictional things? And it's actually, this is one of these hard problems in philosophy. Like, you wouldn't think so, but how do we refer to things? Like, how are we talking about Santa all the time and everyone getting it right? How does that make sense? And they're saying, well, what we're really doing is we're referencing this bundle of properties that we have in like sort of our collective understanding. And that's really what Santa is this sort of, we're referring to the collective bundle of properties. So like, yeah. So that's what we were trying to accomplish, is how to make sense of how we all talk about the same stuff, especially fictional entities. And so we have a common matrix of numerical properties that we can like sort of point to, like the color of like, you know, Santa's outfit, sort of like his jolly look. You can sort of like quantize all that if you want to. That's what we were getting at. It's a sensical way to talk about things that don't exist in the world or only exist in our like group consciousness. So yeah. The issue is that this is actually a very hard problem, Dojo. Talking about things that don't exist and how we can break that down into a sensible way, like, because like if you were talking about like me or you could say, all right, look, I have all these properties, and you can measure that in the world, and those are measurable properties. Okay, like you can, like, my hair color, you can like measure that. Well, how do you measure Santa's hair color? You can't measure Santa's hair color. There's no hair to be measured. But then you can also say, all right, we're going to define Santa's hair color within this range. And that would be a certain counter, like the minimum hair color to the maximum hair color in the RGB like spectrum, that sort of thing. So that's the issue, is how you talk about things in the real world, about stuff that you can't even measure in the real world. That's the philosophical thing.